Hi people, welcome to Blue UK Jazz Dance. I talk about my project Dancing Spirit of Jazz. Dancing Spirit of Jazz, I made people aware that one of the key things about different classes, upper class, middle class and working classes, in the Caribbean we didn't have royalty. We had middle class, we had working class, and you had upper middle class that were there obviously. But one of the things I identified was those who never had education had lifelong learning knowledge. At that time I just talked about we developed my parents never got an education, higher education, but they had learned different ways to learn, and what happened, they were more open. What I found, they were more open to encouraging me to become a learner by exploring different ways of learning, experimenting. Now that happened because both of my parents had learned in different ways. They both were unaware at that time that they both had special education needs challenges. My dad did. My dad was dyslexic, he didn't know that, and my mum. But what they did, they used creative ways in the home. They both, as part of their pastime, engaged in creative cultural activities, and they were unaware that what happens to a person with dyslexia, a person with special education needs, they have to find their way to learn. They all gravitate to creative activities and development, and both my parents were the archetypal of that, and they encouraged us from a very young age. They could see that I was struggling with words, etc. My parents used to identify to me, it's important to explore learning in different ways, and they used experimental ways to teach me the alphabet, as well as rote ways as a key individual. Now my parents would understood immediately, like I did when I became a father, that they grew up and they were quite shy. They were quite in themselves. And it was because they had a lack of a positive self-image and lack of confidence in learning. So one of the key things that my parents did, they encouraged me to have a positive self-image and to do activities that made me confident. Because what the nature of education is, you find an activity to keep you confident that you can learn. So if you go through challenges, you can show resilience. You have a strong personality and character. Thinks, okay, I'm not learning. I have to find a different way to learn. I'll find somebody else. But you always keep enthusiastic and you always keep upbeat, and that's one of the key things that my parents taught me. So Dancing in Spirit of Jazz, that's what I talk about. I talked about that, I identified to individuals. It was a multicultural project, and I talked about what is the commonalities we have. Dancing in Spirit of Jazz encouraged. It encouraged us to keep optimistic and hopeful, and it encouraged us to find a way, find a solution to a way that you can learn. That was one of the key things, and jazz musicians showed that more than anybody else, because individuals came from all ranges. You had upper middle class who played jazz, middle classes played jazz, and people from the slums that played jazz, and they all met each other, okay? So one of the key things was you have to learn to find your way to create your own voice. So that's one of the key things I talked about, the commonalities that we have in learning, that jazz always said, yes, we can do anything that we want. There's 1,002 ways to develop it. E.g., Cecil Taylor made his own scale. So some people created their own scale to develop what they wanted to do. What I did as an individual, I created my own lab, spaces and places. I found places that inspired me. So I love vintage buildings. People need to know in an incredible way. I used to study in front of vintage buildings. I used to like our library because it's vintage. I like to go to places that reflect vintage in the city. So guess where I went to study? Oxford, 05 to 09. Why? Because of that. One, and knowing that I'll be going to London, knowing that I'm going to Cambridge, these are places that would inspire me. Places like Nottingham, I like buildings, I like the art, the architecture, do you understand? I like to go to cities like this, which I know are steeped in the history of vintage and modernism. Do you know what I'm saying? People didn't know that, but I'm giving people insight. That's what inspired me. So that inspired me to study in Bedford. So when I made a decision to Bedford, it was the course. But secondly, I could engage in one of my greatest activities was to be involved in studying vintage buildings, architecture, art. So I went to Bedford, which was 40 miles north of London. When I went to Oxford, that was like an hour away from London also. But Oxford is a very vintage city. Do you understand? Right. And I could go to vintage shops, etc., etc. It's important for people to have understanding. So I talked about Dancing in the Spirit of Jazz, that vintage is important to all of us, and the clothes, for those who are actually into vintage, say something about who you are. It indicates that you're an independent thinker. you're independent learner. It's not for you to dress the same way I dress. It's not for you to talk in the same way I talk. It's not for you to write in the same way I write. It's not for you to speak in the same way I speak. It's not for you to sing in the way that I sing. That's what jazz was about. It was more than just the music. There was something driving it, and people not understood that. What was driving it was that people's liberty got taken away, people's freedom got taken away. And the best freedom that you can show is your own freedom. Do you understand? The best freedom that you can show is you creating your own freedom. So a lot of people were self-made millionaires, example, through their talent. Singers, dancers, writers, yeah, lyricists created their own theatres. People created their own plays. People wrote their own books. Very much a self-reliant environment. Very much it's like an independent, interdisciplinary culture. That was something I was sharing with other individuals. And it was amazing. People didn't think about it on that level. But I was sharing with them the one thing that jazz does, it matures you and makes you think on an intellectual level. That is what jazz does. It matures. Anybody comes into it immediately, you have to mature. Because the nature of the activities that are involved, the nature of the social development of jazz, you have to take it seriously because it comes out of racism. It comes out of great African kingdoms first, and great African kingdoms going to other worlds like Portugal, like the Moors in Europe, whatever. But the history that we know of to do with the development of jazz is about people's freedom and liberty taken away, oppressed people, and having that legacy still here today. But at the same time, not making yourself a victim, looking into jazz from a positive perspective, because that's what I do. And I look at jazz, to me, is a subject which talks about struggle to success. I don't see it as success to struggle. I see it as struggle to success. That's how it is. My success and other people's success came from, one, giving commitment to this art form can only benefit your life. It only can enrich you socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, emotionally, spiritually, politically, economically, technologically, environmentally, legally. You learn things about people you never thought you could learn. And what happened, it takes you on a cross-cultural journey. It takes you on a multicultural journey, because that's one of the things when you talk about jazz, it takes you on a multicultural journey. And it's important for people to understand the multicultural journey in the time that we're living in cultural diversity. Jazz is has to be one of the key things that you study, because what happened, social cultural cohesion came about through jazz. Do you know what I'm saying? People wanted to get together to learn about each other, and had a vehicle. They had music, they had dance, they had clothes, they had something in common that they could talk about. They came together with a mutual understanding. Mutual understanding was developed from them working together on the same bandstand. So jam sessions are crucial for people to get into understanding each other without speaking. And that amazing experience, that social interaction through jam sessions. And the jam sessions in dance also were another way that people got social cohesion came about. Because what happened, the tap dancers, it doesn't matter what culture you are, if you tap dance, I'll find you in your city. So that's one of the key things about dance with me. One of the key things, anywhere I go in the world, I always find dance clubs. And I find progressive learning environments also, because I'm an artist. Immediately, when you find them people, we're all into jazz. Because jazz transcends that. You see what I'm saying? Jazz reflects that. And so you look for it. When you go into each city, what do you know? There's jazz musicians there of that nation. And that's one of the key things I talk to individuals about dancing spirit jazz. Jazz, yes, it was developed by African diaspora people. Do you understand? But what happened, many other cultures were part of it, and it evolved to other cultures using it as a part of their form of expression. But it was not at the point of breaking their liberty or taking away their freedom. It was about saying, bring your voice into this medium. Yeah, African diaspora people bought that. We stand as a symbol for freedom and liberty through our history. And what is that history? That history is the slavery that we went under. Our slave, with the colonialization we went under, which is important for people to understand. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's important that what happened was jazz provided a voice for people to break people's stereotypes about them. And that's one of the key things I talked about dancing spirit jazz. Because I asked people, you know, I'd go in not dressed in vintage clothes in some of the workshops I would do, and I have another room that showed my house, how it was. And I taught people, said, what do you think I do? And I listened to what people said. And most people had a lot of stereotypes about, you know, what music do you think I listen to? I think you do this. What nationality do you think I am? Because many people look at me and call me Jamaican, and Jamaicans are stereotypes. Since slavery, Jamaica's been stereotyped to today, so it's not funny, ha ha ha, but it's a reality. I tell you that already, as an individual. But I used to let people stereotype me. Yeah, most people never got never knew what I did, first of all. They never knew the hobbies that I'd be involved in. Nobody did. I never ever got it. And that was why I did it. And I put, labelled next to it, basically, I identified, look before you leap. That means don't judge a person till you meet them. And have conversation, deep conversation, because some people have superficial conversation. I say that as an artist, which is important. That's why the art is, all I know as an artist, I use my art to dignify myself. I use my art to promote a positive image and energy of my culture. And it's amazing, a situation arose because some people came to me to work with me as an individual, but they were doing like sexual jazz dancing. For adults, it's cool. But they came to me and identified would I work with them in Germany. So they told me to come to an audition they were doing in Manchester. So I went there because the police were stationed there for a while. So when I went there, I saw it was like soft sexual porn dancing, sexual dancing, should I call it, yeah? And I said to the woman, I can't do that. And she said, I don't understand. I said, no, what it is, I have a mission statement. My mission statement is to promote the positive images and energy of my African culture, heritage, art. And I do that for jazz. I can't do that through jazz because jazz was used in a negative way, yeah, to promote sexual activity, etc., etc., and that's how it's been portrayed, yeah. But there was other types of jazz dancing going on that dignified us, and there was dancing that showed us in an undignified way, yeah. And during the period of exotica, in the 1800s, you joined the period of the jungle period in jazz. What happened? Some of our greatest female dancers had to dance in sexual ways. Do you know what I'm saying? That demeaned who we were. But they had to do it to survive. Do you understand? There's no judgment. They didn't do that. They didn't eat. They didn't sleep. They didn't get what they wanted. So I wouldn't do that as an individual. So she was like, she's shocked at first. And then I went into a deeper level. I said, I'm a politicized person. I'm a politicized dancer. And sometimes what happens is people don't believe that street dancers or freestyle dancers or black dancers themselves are politicized. We just do anything and anything. I don't do anything because I have choice now. Do you understand? That's the whole thing. That jazz came for us to have more liberty. Jazz came for us to have more freedom. And what I do, I use my freedom. My freedoms to make sure other people get freedom. Yeah, white, black, or Chinese. And I use my freedom to make other people feel free. Because what happened is some people can be free, but unfortunately they have lack of self-confidence because the way they've been educated in society that says they're free, but the education subliminal images they've got of themselves are one of negativity, so they reflect actually their stereotype about them. I was one of them individuals, when I was growing up. I reflected some of them stereotypes till I knew better. But what happened was I seek to dance in the spirit of jazz. I seek to push the boundaries of my learning. That's what it's about. Push the boundaries of your learning. And for us to push our boundaries of our learning, we used to know everything within our culture is not good. The best way of learning is cross-cultural experimentation. That means you're looking at other cultures' best, the way they've promoted their best, and you have. What's your legacy? What's European legacy? What is British legacy? Irish legacy? What can I learn from other cultures, which is important? What can I learn about humanitarian rights? What can I learn about socializing in a better way? What ways can I learn to develop myself physically, for example, is a prime example. Because what happened as a dancer, I didn't only do African dance, I didn't only Caribbean dance, I've done ballet, I've done tango, I looked at flamenco, I looked into the history of these dances, and I liked the history, the background, do you understand? I looked at ballroom, I looked at hip-hop, I looked at different types of tap. I've told that already, but it's important that people understand that it was all about cross-cultural experimentation. And what happens is individuals don't want to do that because they've been brought up to discriminate against others. So, for example, UK jazz dance was debased by many DJs who played that music. Do you understand? Outside my culture, was debased by the proprietors, or debased by wider cultures who never knew the history of it. And it was done because of discrimination, because they hated us, not because they thought this dance was taken away from them, something in the club. It was not done because of that. It was done because people stereotyped us, and anything that comes from African diaspora people is nothing of value. So everything that we do, diss it, put it down, debase it, demeanor it. That was our history. But what happened has been a beautiful thing, because through our tenacity, through our resilience in spreading this dance all over the world, what has happened? People started to research it. People started to see it had value because we showed it value. That's one of the greatest things I've done in sense of my legacy. I showed value to what I was doing. I became an independent educator. Nobody was really doing education the same way I was doing it. And that happened because the teachers I studied under a teacher who had masters. Gentleman called Sir Roy Blackman. He had masters in education and he had resources. So I was the first person to collect resources to give people an understanding. Where did I get my ideas from? What inspired me? Buster Keaton, Laurel Hardy, Harold Lloyd, all of these. I studied cars and started to put car characteristics into my body movement. Do you understand? That's what I did. And a character I played called The Adventures of the Swing Kid. How did I learn the cane? How did I learn physical comedy? Because I studied it, because there was no school. I created my own school. So I created my own school of advanced training and development. I created my own school of research and development. Yeah? And that was outside and inside. So I went to certain places people didn't know. I was studying certain buildings. So I'd go back to that place. It may be a cathedral, like the Liverpool Cathedral. I go there, sit in the cathedral and get inspiration for dancing. People don't know that's one of the creative ways that people learn. And what happens is, unless someone tells you that, people don't know that. Do you understand? And that comes from coming from a perspective of being an educational person and going back and talking about my parents taught me many ways to learn, and it's because they got no paper. I don't respect them. Don't be ridiculous. By saying that many people did that. It's only 1990 that what's happened in the UK, lifelong learning has come. That's all that's happened. So what happened, it offered opportunities for more people to get back into university. Now, I got into university, got to do a degree in 89, 91. The back of that, I worked with professional companies. I had amazing testimonials. I had documented my reflective practice as an educator, as a dancer,